In a transaction, there is a buyer and there is a seller. The reason that commission became blurry and that companies shelled out hundreds of millions of dollars is because real estate agents have to understand what we're about to talk about right now. Real estate companies shelled out, including ours, hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm gonna put that number on here. That's $100 million in multiples for you guys to understand what I'm about to say. In the past, the seller hired a listing agent. The listing agent negotiated upfront commission. This commission was then split to a buyer broker and a listing broker. A class action lawsuit came about and said, hey, when I hired a listing agent, they told me that I needed to pay commission to a person I'm negotiating against who represents the buyer. Like, I'm already paying a buyer broker when why did I have to lock in a commission amount if I don't have an offer, first and foremost, and second, that doesn't make any sense. After hundreds of millions of dollars, the National Association of Realtors came out and said, okay, here's how this has to go forward. Just like an attorney, a buyer gets representation and a seller gets representation. A buyer writes an offer to a seller, and then the seller negotiates with the buyer a purchase price. Well, at the end of a purchase price, you have closing costs, you have, let's just call it contingencies, and then you have commission. So you have price, you have costs, then you have, in theory, a mortgage that has to be paid off. Does that make sense? So a seller has a mortgage that has to be paid off. They have their own closing costs. They have, let's just say, the roof needs to be replaced. They fix the roof. There's plumbing issues, so they fix the plumbing. And then they have to pay their agent commission. Well, the seller was saying, whoa, why am I negotiating this up front? If I don't know what type of offer I'm getting, I know what I'm gonna pay my representation, but why am I paying a buyer broker if I got no relationship with them? So what NAR said is, oh, okay, if we as an industry should behave as a fiduciary, and if you guys are taking notes, write that word down and study it. How to be a fiduciary, a fiduciary. Like an attorney is a fiduciary. An attorney, the one side pays for their fiduciary, and on the other side, they pay for their fiduciary. Well, there are many times in court or in representation where once it's all said and done, one side pays the other side's fees. When it's all said and done, not going into a legal battle. Does this make sense? So if a real estate agent is in a fiduciary agreement with a buyer, there needs to be an agreement of what the rules are. I must deal honestly and fairly. I must account for all funds. I must use skill, care, and diligence. I must have confidentiality. I must do all of these activities that a fiduciary represents. And by the way, buyer, to behave in this manner, to find the right home, to negotiate on your behalf, to manage the vendors, to get us to the finish line, that will be a amount of blank. There'll be amount of blank. So that could be $10,000, that could be $7,000, that could be $150,000. Whatever the amount is that we have agreed to get into relationship together. Does this make sense? Okay. So there's a relationship between the buyer broker and the purchaser or the buyer. So then we find the house and we write an offer. So when we write the offer, we write an offer for the price of the home, for contingencies, and to cover the buyer's commission. Because the buyer has agreed to a commission amount. So we're submitting as part of the offer between the seller and the buyer because the buyer has the cost. Without this agreement, the buyer broker has risk of not being compensated. So as part of any offer, the buyer has to write the offer knowing that this here is a closing cost that the buyer has. And any help that the seller provides in this negotiation is less money the buyer has to bring to closing per the agreement before we even looked at the house. The reason a broker would write an offer as you just presented is because they don't understand this. And they're still thinking the old way, which is listing broker agrees to a certain amount of commission and compensates buyer broker. That's the old way of thinking. When the rule changed last summer, we were taught the right way, the way the Department of Justice wants it to be, the way National Association of Realtors says it should be, not the old way, which is the way that this, hey, listing broker, you should have already come to an agreement with the seller to compensate me. That's not the way it's supposed to be, per Department of Justice, per the National Association of Realtors, and per the hundreds of millions of dollars of settlement to change the way we did it.
So today the valuation fee or commission, it's a nominal amount.
So
it's not a percentage of
it could be. It could be, but it's an agreement. It's an agreement between buyer broker and buyer. It could be whatever amount. It could be a percent. It could be a nominal amount. But it's an agreement between buyer broker and buyer. And then anything the seller helps is a bonus so that the buyer doesn't have to bring as much money to the table. So there's a saying, and this might make sense. Buyer agents who represent buyers will finally get paid what they're worth. So if it's going to take a long time, then agents are going to get paid what they're worth, which is Jack. Like I taught Win with buyers for literally 2 months, slow played it. Out of an office of 160, I had an average of 7 in the room. Y'all are going to starve. That's facts. I taught you how to do a buyer consultation, how to present your value, how to do all these things. I had 7 of you guys in the room. All bets are off that you're going to make money representing buyers when like this agent, she's sending over, hey, what am I getting paid? But then at the same time, as you said, you sit down with a buyer and the buyer's like, I'm not paying you. I don't blame you. I don't know why you would pay me either. But then when that's the attitude, that's the way it's gonna be. But when you run your business like a fiduciary and you explain what you do differently and you learn how to handle the questions and concerns that a buyer has, that's where we're at.